The Interstate Highway System is a vast network of interconnected roads that crosses the United States. Conceived by President Eisenhower in the 1950s, it was originally intended to strengthen national defense and reduce traffic congestion. The system is known for its uniform lane width, signage, and exit numbering, which contribute to safe and streamlined travel. The federally funded project eventually played a crucial role in shaping the country's economic and social landscape. As construction of the interstates progressed, America's highways changed from small, two-lane roads to a well-connected network of expressways that linked the entire nation. This was ultimately a turning point for the country's demographics and economic centers, which soon moved away from the cities and towards suburbs. Prior to the construction of the interstate highway system, road standards in America were very poor. Most roads had only 2 lanes, with one running in each direction. Disorganization and a lack of safety standards contributed to many safety concerns and traffic problems. Roads didn't have barriers and were not separated from commercial areas. Trees, utility poles, and other objects were often right by highways, leading to a dangerous accident if a motorist lost control of their vehicle. Additionally, passing was a major issue. As a result of the 2-lane nature of the roads, drivers had to cross into the opposing lane and pass before a collision with another vehicle. These problems were apparent for a long time. In 1939, Thomas MacDonald, then chief of the Bureau of Public Roads, and his top aide, Herbert Fairbank, came up with a solution to this, the foundation of which would eventually become the interstate highway system. In their report to Congress, they suggested that new highways should only be built where they were needed by cities. Everywhere else in the U.S., where railroads were used for travel and transport of freight, there was no need to build new roads. Based on this idea, they devised a plan where rural areas kept the same roads as before and upgraded them to federal standards. New highways were to be built in metropolitan areas where traffic was a concern. However, the overall number of vehicles moving on long-distance roads was low at the time, and Congress could not justify the costly, innovative ideas MacDonald and Fairbank brought. At the time, Eisenhower was in Western Europe fighting in the Second World War. While in Germany, he saw how easy troop movement and travel was along the Autobahn. Highway planners and politicians from countries all around the world were going to Germany to see the marvelous new superhighway. This experience convinced Eisenhower of the importance of high-quality long-distance roads, and he eventually ended up bringing the idea into his presidency. When Eisenhower was elected in 1952, the popularity of American roads had drastically increased from when MacDonald and Fairbank presented their ideas. Post-war America was looking for economic development, and American families were looking for peace and prosperity. However, the Cold War with the Soviet Union was raging on. The Soviet hydrogen bomb soon increased American anxieties and strengthened the need for a quick and effective transportation system. The idea was that a highway system would strengthen the national defense and allow for easy transportation in and out of cities, allowing people to evacuate quickly in case of a nuclear attack. As a result, between 1954 and 1956, there were many attempts to pass a national highway bill through Congress. After considerable debate, Congress ultimately passed the Federal Highway Act of 1956 and authorized $25 billion in federal funding to construct the highways. The act provided for a 41,000-mile-long system of national interstate highways to be constructed over 13 years, an effort which would eventually become the largest public works project in the nation's history. Soon after the act was passed, highway planners began to propose routes for the new highways to be built. Most of the time, since there was a large traffic problem in urban areas, the interstates were designed to cut through cities in order to maximize their effectiveness. However, the announcement of these routes prompted property depreciation in many cities. Residential neighborhoods were often right alongside the proposed highways, and their proximity was not admired by real estate agents. As a result, even before the interstates began to be constructed, many houses lost their values and neighborhoods and cities were disrupted. However, city residents were unwilling to put up with these changes. Throughout the nation, citizens banded together to protest the construction of new highways in demonstrations known as freeway revolts. Most notably, in 1959, residents of San Francisco came together to protest against the new I-280 route construction. The proposed route was planned to go through San Francisco's neighborhoods, cutting off the east side of Potrero Hill. Although it was ultimately voted into construction, the effort of these protesters inspired others to do the same in their own neighborhoods. The freeway revolts pitted city residents against urban planners, representing the struggle between preserving local quality of life and fighting for economic growth. As a result, many highways were abandoned in the middle of their construction or significantly scaled back due to widespread opposition. When the highways were built in their intended manner, cities quickly saw increased mobility. Reduced travel time for cars, trucks, and buses allowed for less traffic congestion. Along rural highways, the first signs of commercial development began to emerge. Motels and food stops flourished along long stretches of empty, isolated roads and were the beginnings of fast food franchises and mainstream hotels. These economic changes were soon seen in more than just rural areas. The increased speed of transportation that came through interstates led to improved economic efficiency and productivity. As companies became more comfortable with moving their freight along highways instead of by train, industry rapidly expanded and was able to reach a larger geographic area at lower costs. However, this change in transportation wasn't only seen by businesses. Since the interstate highway system contained the first roads that were built exclusively for cars and trucks, people found it much easier to use automobiles and travel on their own time. As a result, public transportation widely declined, and cars became increasingly common throughout the country. This was ultimately a turning point in American travel methods. By increasing the popularity of automobiles, the interstates intensified car dominance in the United States and strengthened their position as the preferred method of transportation. Long-distance travel and daily commuting became significantly more convenient, and people found it beneficial to use cars more frequently. As a result, road trips and car ownership expanded soon after the construction of interstates. The new ease of transportation eventually changed the location of business as well. In many cities, central business districts were depreciated and crowded. Next to these business centers were blighted residential areas whose standing was worsened with the construction of interstates. Even though new routes were constructed to connect rural and suburban areas to businesses, cities were often left out. As a result, many urban centers lost their economic importance. Individuals and families decided to move toward the suburbs, with businesses soon following. In suburban areas, there was lots of available land that was significantly less expensive than in cities. This benefit convinced businesses to move, especially since they wanted to be closer to their recently relocated client base. The change in business location eventually led to the rise of shopping centers, as malls and other new retailers emerged to serve the growing population. The shift in commercial centers also expanded parking lots and promoted the construction of homes around shopping areas. As highways continued to be constructed, cities also saw many physical changes. Small businesses, churches, and green spaces were largely erased with the growth of interstates. Highways disrupted the pedestrian landscape and worsened air quality, making many people unhappy with their life in cities. As flocks of people relocated to the suburbs in a phenomenon known as white flight, minorities were the only ones who remained in city centers. Wealthier residents had the means to buy new homes and travel from home to work in their cars. However, residents of inner cities, most of whom were African American, couldn't afford to do so and were left behind. In these areas, highways were built to cut through neighborhoods, and the remaining families were forced to abandon their homes where new roads were being constructed. As a result, inner cities were facing significant abandonment and decay. Multi-lane roadbeds, concrete walls, ramps, and overpasses physically isolated communities of color and reinforced racial segregation. Discriminatory housing practices like redlining further hurt African Americans and prevented them from moving to better areas. Displaced residents, unable to buy houses in the suburbs, were forced to crowd into the remaining sections of inner cities. Communities already facing issues of poverty and urban decay now also had to contend with overcrowding. Consequently, the interstate highway system worsened racial and socioeconomic disparities in cities throughout the nation. As more people realize the problems created by interstates and city communities, efforts are being made today to fix these issues. New highways are being rerouted to go around cities rather than through them. The interstate highway system, first created to solve issues of urban overcrowding and traffic, ultimately couldn't solve the problems that inspired its creation. Eisenhower's vision for a fast transportation network for America's troops did come to fruition, but this success was overshadowed by its impacts on economic development and the movement to the suburbs it inspired. The interstate highway system was ultimately a turning point for America's demographics and permanently changed the makeup of cities throughout the nation.